I just read one of the most incredible, beautifully written mangas I've ever laid my eyes on, but ever since I finished it, I've had this theory racing around in my head. It makes so much sense, and yet, if it's true, I think it might just ruin this amazing series for me. So this video is a way of getting it off of my chest, and hopefully for someone to come along and tell me I'm wrong. Yes, I want to be wrong. The series I'm talking about is called Correspondence from the End of the Universe. Our main character is 22-year-old Marco. After graduating university, he planned to go on a world trip with someone who he has known since he was a child and just recently has begun dating. But before he could go, he was transported to an alien planet and told he has to work managing and creating planets for 10 years until he will be allowed to return home. While he's understandably apprehensive and tries to escape at the start, he eventually realizes he doesn't have a choice and begins to enjoy exploring all these worlds he never even knew existed. But all the while, he misses his lover deeply, with the engagement ring he planned to propose with being the only possession that came with him, serving as a constant reminder of the person he left behind. Throughout the entire manga, we never get to see Marco's partner's face, or really much of them at all. We learn about them through Marco's memories and their own words at the end of the series, but who they are remains a total mystery, and yet it's because of their identity that I'm making this video. You see, I think Marco's lover might be his adopted older brother Alyosha. This is the point in the video where you pause and go read it for yourself. It's only 39 chapters, and despite what I just said, it is worth every second of your time. Everyone done? Okay, continuing. Brother thing aside for a second, I am certain Marco's lover is a man. Diverse relationships are highlighted in the series. I mean, it's about aliens, everything is diverse. But we're shown a massive variety of family structures and traditions of partnership. 2 alien women in a relationship are reoccurring characters. This theory falls in line with the series, and is not just something I'm pulling out of thin air. Marco's partner is only referred to by gender-neutral pronouns throughout the entirety of the series. It's not girlfriend, but lover or partner. Or in Japanese, more literally, the person I love. Their gender is intentionally left ambiguous. What really cemented it for me was when Marco met a version of himself from a planet that's essentially a clone of Earth. As they talk, they unravel that their lives are actually quite different. Alternate Marco married a girl he was friends with as a kid when he was 21, and now has 2 daughters. This girl also existed on Earth, but Marco lost touch with her and quite obviously never considered her to be a love interest. Our Marco is incredibly shocked that he has kids, but also that he got married in his home country instead of moving abroad like he planned. Marco is from Russia, a country that heavily discriminates against LGBT+ people. When asked to show a photo of his partner, Marco pauses and then refuses because he didn't have one. He could have just said who his partner is in that moment, but instead he doesn't and rather immediately changes the topic of conversation. Later on, he runs into himself again, and alternate Marco asks for Marco's partner's name so he can make sure they're happy in this world. Reluctantly, Marco whispers it to him. They stand in silence for a second, and all alternate Marco has to say is, "Right, yeah," before swiftly leaving. Alternate Marco was already prepared for the name to be different from his wife's. No woman's name would invoke that kind of awkward reaction. He must have said a man's name. There's other evidence too. At the start of the series, he tells his childhood friends about his new relationship. Despite liking his partner for years, they had no idea Marco even liked this person, let alone started dating them. And at the end of their conversation, he thanks them for being supportive. He and his partner intend to travel the world until they find a place they want to live in forever. Marco also planned to propose once they left on their trip, again because they can't get married in their homeland. From the brief glimpses of Marco's lover we get, we can see they're tall, their build is very square, and they seem to have short hair. They look quite masculine. Their most distinctive feature we see are large scars that look like burns on their arm and leg, which brings me back to Marco's adopted older brother Alyosha. Marco's parents died in a car accident about half a year before the start of the manga. We are never told exactly what happened, but we do know that Marco's father was engulfed in flames. While only his parents died, I believe Alyosha was involved in the accident too. In a flashback, we see Marco finding out about their deaths. He's told his family were involved in an accident, not his parents, but his family. And they were involved in, not died in. You would only say something vague like that if you were then going to go on to say someone survived. We never see Alyosha after the accident. All Marco's memories are from before. The scars could very well be there. This perfectly explains Marco's partner's burn scars, which are otherwise a very random detail to include. While we're on appearance, we see glimpses of the top of their head, which is covered in blonde hair the same as Alyosha's. Marco has known his partner his entire life. When he was 3, he learned about the tooth fairy and wanted to place a tooth under his pillow, but he was too young to lose any at the time. So his partner, who is a few years older, gave Marco one of their baby teeth. How has a 3-year-old managed to become close with someone at least double their age? That seems more like something an older brother would do, and Alyosha is a few years older than Marco. Marco loves to swim, but his partner doesn't know how. Even so, all throughout their childhood, his partner would sit on the shore and watch Marco swim for hours at a time. Again, that feels a lot more like an older brother supervising his sibling than friends hanging out. Alyosha was adopted when he was around 6 years old, so he wouldn't have learned to swim as a kid like Marco did. We know Marco wants his partner to rely on him more, but they struggle to see him as anything other than a little kid they need to protect. Alyosha views Marco the same way. When Marco was 7, his relatives told him Alyosha was adopted even though their parents wanted to wait longer. This resulted in a massive fight, which Marco thought he was responsible for. Alyosha dragged him away and comforted him. He told Marco it's okay to be selfish because he will always be there to make it better for him. Despite how close Marco and his partner were all their lives, they only started dating a few months before the start of the series, right after Marco's parents died. In a flashback, we find out Marco was actually very reluctant to confess and was planning to keep it a secret forever. It's like only now that his parents are gone, he feels he is finally able to stop hiding his feelings. Because any sane parent would oppose their children dating. Alyosha and Marco's partner, both of whom we only really see through Marco's memories, are presented as two totally separate characters. But at the same time, they're also the complete opposite of each other, like they're two sides of the same coin. When Marco remembers his partner, it's only positive things. How they would make him feel better, how they invited him to travel the world, how they loved his eyes. When Marco talks about his brother, he only shares negative memories. Times his brother teased him, scared him, or when he thought he made his whole family hate him. With one exception. At the end of the story, Marco talks to God for the second time. God doesn't have a physical body, so they take on a form from the memories of the person they are talking to. In this case, God becomes Marco's earliest memory. Since being adopted, the very first thing Alyosha asked for was to celebrate Halloween, and of course their parents were all for it, despite it not being October. Their father made Alyosha a ghost costume from scraps of fabric, which he paraded around the house in. Both Alyosha and Marco really enjoyed it. Throughout this entire interaction with God and in Marco's memory, we never see Alyosha's face. It's covered by the costume. Considering this happens at the end of the story, I see this as a thematic bridging of the two characters. Alyosha, who we fully see but only negatively, and Marco's partner, who we never see but is always positive. We know this character is Alyosha, but they're happy. Marco laughs and smiles when he remembers this moment, just like he does when he thinks about his partner. Marco switches between talking about Alyosha and his partner so quickly it gives me whiplash. Right after the scene I just talked about, Marco hops on a call with an alien that can help him track down his partner. And right after that, he goes back to thinking about Alyosha again. When he meets alternate Marco, not only does his partner not exist, but his brother doesn't either. This chapter was set up perfectly to finally reveal everything about Marco's partner, and yet the chapter focuses entirely on Alyosha, who was barely mentioned in the Marco's conversation. And yet, Marco was extremely disturbed by it, more so than his partner not being there. The manga is written exactly like they're the same person. But Marco has just compartmentalized the memories he doesn't like to be with his brother and stuff he did like to be things his lover did. Sometimes these things also blatantly blur together. At the end of the story, just before Marco reunites with his partner, he talks with their roommates. They can't believe he's real, that the Marco who was struck by lightning and abducted by aliens is actually a real person. We never see Marco mention any of this to his partner, but we see him have this exact conversation with Alyosha. The first time someone turns into Alyosha isn't God, but the director, another alien in the same situation as Marco. The director usually wears a costume that I can only describe as salad fingers-esque, but underneath he's an alien similar to a crustacean that when looked at by someone will take the form of the person they are most afraid of, which apparently for Marco is Alyosha. The explanation Marco gives is that Alyosha teased him a lot when they were kids, but that hardly seems enough to make him the person he's most afraid of, especially now that Marco is an adult. There's clearly much more to it, which Marco hints at when he tells the director there are various kinds of horrible things. See, this is the same chapter where we were shown the phone call about his family's accident. I think this all ties back into Alyosha's involvement in it and his resulting scars. The appearance the director takes on looks quite young. It matches with the memory of 12-year-old Marco, meaning Alyosha would be around 18. That was 10 years ago. 18 and 28-year-old Alyosha would obviously look very different. Marco Mako is specifically afraid of this younger version of Alyosha. Maybe it's because Mako was so afraid of Alyosha ever finding out how he really felt about him. Maybe he fears the image of the person he viewed as his brother his whole life now that their relationship has changed. Maybe Mako feels guilty about Alyosha being the one caught in the accident. He doesn't fear the current Alyosha's scarred appearance because that's the person he loves, but he's scared of what was, what Alyosha has lost. For me, a combination of all this anxiety is the only justifiable way for Alyosha to be the person Mako fears most. The explanation Mako provides in the series just seems trivial. I spoke about the second time God appeared, but what about the first? The first time Mako spoke to God, God also took on the form of Alyosha, the exact same version of Alyosha the director appears as. God explains that they take on the form of what the person they are meeting thinks they will be, that person's imaginary image of God. Why would it be Alyosha, the person we were told Mako fears most? Mako is from Earth. He knows all the same religious figures we do. Wouldn't it be something more along those lines? I'm not religious, but I would say my image of God defaults to a glowing ball of light. To have it just be a person you know seems strange. Unless it's someone you really admire or love. Like how a stereotypical K-pop stan dedicates themselves to supporting one idol. Or how someone who is so deeply in love with their partner vows to spend their life with them, like following their own personal religion. Alyosha appears because he is the person Mako loves. But if Mako thought God would appear as his lover, why would it be the version he's specifically afraid of and not the late 20s version he's currently dating? This is explained by God's second appearance. While the person meeting God decides who they will be, God can go through that person's memories and pick the exact form he takes on. Again, the Alyosha God turns into is the same one the director turned into. It's the image of Alyosha that would have been the freshest in Mako's mind, therefore the easiest, most obvious form to pick. During their first meeting, God antagonizes Mako to the point he grabs them by the collar and is about to hit them. But he looks at the ring on his thumb that has his lover's tooth stored in it and decides not to. What relevance at all does Mako's lover have to this scene? Would they be really mad if he hit someone? Even though Mako's lover seems to resort to violence quickly too. It's not like Mako is a saint either. He gets mad, uses people, and concocts lies throughout the series with not a thought to how his partner would feel. And yet in this moment, when it's completely justified, it's too far? Please, it has to be because he can't hurt the appearance of his lover. There is so much more, I feel like I'm going crazy. When Mako awakes after being struck by lightning, he jumps straight into Alyosha's arms, who he's supposedly afraid of instead of his parents. The director passes out drunk when he was transformed into Alyosha, and Mako comments that he's never seen Alyosha like this. We don't see them share a drink, but Mako does like to drink with his lover. Mako's parents owned a furniture store, and his friends commented now that Mako and his lover are going on a wild trip, there will be no one to run the store. But we know Alyosha is a furniture maker, so that wouldn't make sense unless he's going on the trip. Also, when Mako finally reunites with his lover, they were in the middle of sorting fabric samples. In the final chapter, Mako's lover wants to meet the alternate Mako. Mako jokingly says no, but his lover says they won't mistake him for the real Mako just because they look the same. This comment really seems to disturb Mako, even though he and alternate Mako have become really close friends. It's like he's thinking back on all the times people turned into Alyosha and how hard that was for him. I'm done. I think I've made my point clear enough. To end, I'd like to leave you with a poorly translated quote from a Japanese blogger who seems to have gone through the exact same mental breakdown I did. It is not important to the story whether Alyosha is Mako's lover or not. Somewhere in this universe, they exist. It makes me think that like them, even if I get caught up in a storm of unreasonableness and absurdity, I will survive boldly and live on. So, I think I will read it again from now on. Then eventually, the day will come when I clearly know Mako's lover. Thank you for your time.